Welcome back, dear adventurers, to another chapter of 9 Lives, a Felidian Tale. I'm your host, Owen, and as always, I'm grateful to have you join me in the enchanting world of Felidia. Before we dive into tonight's story, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to each of you for being here. Your enthusiasm is the spark that brings life to this journey, and sharing each twist and turn with you is truly a joy. As always, 9 Lives is crafted to be a calming, immersive experience, so find a cozy spot, settle in, and let the world of Felidia carry you toward a peaceful state of rest. In our last chapter, Finn and his companions discovered the source of the strange resonance that had been haunting the mountains, a dark enchantment tied to an ancient bell and guarded by a powerful, mysterious mage. The bell's resonance held the wolves under its spell, a dangerous magic radiating from its low, haunting hum. Yet, as the party tried to intervene, they were struck by tragedy. Lyric, their dear friend and bard, was drawn toward the bell, ultimately taken by the mage in a flash of devastating magic. In a final act of bravery, Finn shattered the bell, hoping to break its spell. They collected the scattered fragments, along with a rune-covered book, both of which may hold clues to the mage's power and Lyric's fate. Tonight, we join our heroes as they carry the weight of Lyric's memory and their newfound mysteries back to Mossburrow. With heavy hearts but renewed determination, they begin the journey home, holding close the hope that their friend's legacy will guide them forward. So take a deep breath, let your mind drift into the misty forests of Felidia, and join us for Chapter 13, The Road Back and the Journey Ahead. The soft light of dawn touched the southern shrine, casting a gentle glow over the ancient stones, shimmering as if the shrine itself was reluctant to let the adventurers go. The air was cool, with just the faintest hint of warmth that promised a sunny day ahead. It was the kind of morning that should have been peaceful, a moment to savor. Yet it was bittersweet for the adventurers gathered there. The camp was quiet as Finn, Thornwhisker, Brightpaw, and Willowshade packed their belongings. Each movement was deliberate, their eyes tired yet resolute. The events of the previous day lingered heavily, especially for Finn, who glanced back at the shrine every few minutes, as if expecting to see Lyric's silver-blue fur appear just beyond the stone arch. Willowshade knelt, her robes trailing in the dew-drenched grass as she bundled her bedding, her violet eyes flicking to the shrine's doorway, her expression thoughtful. Thornwhisker worked in silence, his heavy armor clinking softly as he cinched a strap here and tightened a buckle there. Brightpaw, his face uncharacteristically somber, looked up into the early morning light filtering through the trees before finally breaking the silence. "I don't know about the rest of you," Brightpaw said, his golden fur catching the early rays, "but I'll be glad to get back to civilization. My tail's had enough of sleeping on these stones." Finn looked up, managing a small smile. "I'm with you," he replied, though his humor lacked its usual spark. "A real bed sounds nice." "It will do us good," Willowshade agreed, shifting her pack as she tightened its bindings. She paused, her fingers brushing against something hard at the bottom of her pack. Frowning, she reached in and pulled out a bundle wrapped in soft, dark cloth. "What's that?" Thornwhisker asked, his voice gruff with curiosity. Willowshade carefully unwrapped the bundle, and as the cloth fell away, her eyes widened in surprise. There, nestled within, was Lyric's songbook. Its cover was scratched and worn, the edges frayed, as though it had seen countless journeys. Willowshade felt a strange warmth radiating from the book, almost like a heartbeat. "It's Lyric's," she whispered, holding it up for the others to see. Finn stepped closer, his green eyes wide, his tail flicking anxiously. "But how? I thought—" He trailed off, unsure what to think. Willowshade sighed softly. "He must have slipped it into my bag before we headed off to the bell," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "He always had a way of planning ahead, even when we didn't know what was coming." She opened the book gently, revealing the first few pages filled with Lyric's elegant, flowing script. The words were notes, musings, sketches of landscapes, and lyrics of songs, a journal that spoke to his life as a bard. Tucked within the pages, acting as a makeshift bookmark, was Lyric's eternal tag, still showing the number 5. Finn took a sharp breath as he looked at it, The tag still showed the number 5. "How can it still say 5? Brightpaw asked, his brow furrowing. He hesitated, his voice dropping. "He's gone, right? The number should have changed." Willowshade held the tag between her fingers, her gaze growing more intense as she studied it. "The tag. It doesn't feel right," she murmured. "Normally these tags hum with a bit of magic, something you can feel if you concentrate. But this one, it's cold, devoid of magic, almost like it's not a real tag." Thornwhisker crossed his arms, his amber eyes narrowing. "There's something we don't understand yet," he said. Willowshade nodded, tucking the tag back into the book. "For now, we'll keep this safe. It's part of Lyric's legacy, maybe even a clue. We owe it to him to find out." The group fell into a somber silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. Thornwhisker gave a small nod. "We need to move out. Mossburrow is waiting." They packed the last of their gear and, with one last glance at the southern shrine, set off into the forest, heading for the small town of Mossburrow. The forest around them was lush, the towering trees creating a vibrant green canopy overhead, their leaves rustling in the breeze. Birds called out from above, filling the air with an oddly comforting sense of normalcy. The path beneath their feet was well worn but winding, leading them through patches of sunlight and shadow as they made their way back towards civilization. For a time they walked in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Then, Brightpaw broke the quiet, his sharp green eyes glancing over at Finn. "Do you remember that time Lyric convinced the villagers of that tiny hamlet that he was a wandering prince in disguise?" Brightpaw asked, a grin tugging at his lips. Thornwhisker blinked, then smiled, the memory coming back to him. "Oh yes," he said. "That was the village of Thistledale, right?" "That's the one," Brightpaw replied, his tail flicking with amusement. He had them absolutely convinced. Even the mayor was ready to offer him the town key. I think he even made one of those old crones swoon. Willowshade laughed softly, shaking her head. Lyric always did have a way with words. He could charm his way into or out of almost anything. Thornwhisker snorted. "He saved our tales more times than I can count. Remember the bandits at Stone Hollow?" He glanced at Brightpaw. "They were ready to fight until Lyric convinced them that we were just a traveling troupe of minstrels and cooks. By the time we left, they were applauding us. They even gave us some of their rations," Brightpaw added, chuckling. "I don't think I'll ever forget the look on Thornwhisker's face when they offered him a tambourine." Thornwhisker gave a mock glare, though his eyes were warm. "I'd rather have faced all of them with my club than play a tambourine, but Lyric always knew the right thing to say, even if it made me look like a fool." The mood lightened as they walked, each of them sharing stories that painted a fuller picture of their lost friend, his humor, his bravery, and the way he made even the darkest moments bearable. Finn listened intently, absorbing every detail as though he could understand Lyric better through these shared memories. He had only known Lyric for a short time, but it felt like he was truly getting to know the bard now, through the eyes of those who had seen him at his best and bravest. After some time, Finn looked up, his expression pensive. "How did you all meet Lyric, anyway?" he asked. "I've heard bits and pieces, but never the full story." Thornwhisker exchanged a glance with Willowshade and Brightpaw. There was a shared understanding in their eyes, one forged by the shared memories of that fateful day. After a moment, Thornwhisker nodded. "It was about 5 years ago," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "We were part of a larger expedition from the Guild, a mission to explore the Whispering Ruins." Brightpaw's ears perked up and he took over, his voice animated. "The Whispering Ruins were supposed to be full of treasure and magic, but also full of traps. Picture walls that whispered threats and promises, paths that looped back on themselves, and a sense that the ruin itself was alive, trying to turn us against each other. We didn't really know what we were walking into." Willowshade's gaze turned distant, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. The ruins were alive with enchantments, hallways shifting, walls that moved, whispers that tried to pull us apart. It was like the ruin fed on fear, turning every corner into a new nightmare. It was a place meant to break you. Thornwhisker nodded. "We got separated from the main group. It felt like hours of wandering, each of us growing more hopeless as we tried to find our way back. The air grew thicker with magic, dark magic that played with your senses, made you see things that weren't real. We stumbled into a large chamber, and the doors slammed shut behind us. That's when the constructs came alive. Giant stone golems, each one more menacing than the last. Finn's eyes widened as he listened, captivated. He could almost picture it, the massive golems bearing down, the despair in the room just before Lyric's song filled the air. Willowshade continued, her voice soft. We were barely holding on, trying everything we knew. Thornwhisker was fighting with all his strength, but it wasn't enough. The more we fought, the more they seemed to adapt. Brightpaw nodded. And then, just when we thought it was over, we heard it. A soft tune echoing through the dark. It was haunting at first, like something out of a dream. Lyric came into the room, and his lute seemed to almost shimmer in the dim light. He walked right up to those constructs, like he wasn't afraid at all. Willowshade added, "It was more than just music, Finn. The song he played had magic in it, real magic, like it could speak to the stones themselves." The golems hesitated, their heavy limbs slowing, and that was when we knew we had a chance. Brightpaw smiled. Lyric moved to the center of the room, strumming like he was weaving a spell. The more he played, the more the constructs lost their will to fight. They just stopped. They returned to where they came from and turned back to stone, like they were never alive in the first place. Thornwhisker nodded. He saved us that day, no question, and afterward there wasn't much debate about him joining us permanently. Finn nodded, listening closely, picturing every detail. Lyric had led them out, and though they were strangers at first, it was clear from the way they spoke that Lyric had quickly become much more. In that moment, Finn felt a deep sense of gratitude to have been a part of Lyric's world, even if only for a short while. As the forest began to thin and Mossburrow's rooftops appeared in the distance, Thornwhisker turned to the others. "We need to decide what to tell the townsfolk," he said quietly. "They deserve the truth about the bell and the wolves' enchantment, but the mage and what happened to Lyric." Willowshade nodded. "Let's tell them what they need to know. The rest, we can share with the guildmaster." Finn looked up, a thoughtful frown on his face. "Are we doing the right thing? Keeping secrets, I mean." Thornwhisker placed a heavy paw on Finn's shoulder. "Sometimes the full truth is more burden than anyone needs to carry. But we'll make sure Lyric's memory is honored, Finn. You have my word." As they entered Mossburrow, they headed to the Hearth and Paws, the village's cozy tavern. Stoneclaw, the stout tavern keeper, greeted them with a warm smile, his grey fur flecked with silver in the firelight. "Back from the mountain, I see," he said, eyeing their weary faces. "You'll be needing rooms and a meal, I imagine." Finn nodded gratefully, sinking onto a stool. Soon after, Elder Briarwhisker arrived, his sharp amber eyes flicking from face to face, taking in their expressions with quiet concern. They recounted their tale, the bell's enchantment, the wolves, and the ritual they had performed to quell the dangerous magic. When they were done, Elder Briarwhisker nodded slowly, his face solemn. "You've done well, each of you," he said, his voice filled with respect. "Mossburrow owes you a debt, and I'll be sure the guild knows of your bravery." Later that night, as they settled into their rooms, Finn sat by the window, Lyric's songbook open in his lap. The pages were filled with sketches and notes, fragments of lyrics and musings that spoke to Lyric's thoughtful, introspective nature. Finn closed the book, his heart filled with a quiet, lingering sadness. But as he drifted into sleep, he felt a comforting presence, as though Lyric's spirit was watching over them, his music still echoing softly in the night. And in the quiet of the Mossburrow night, they all fell into a restful slumber, holding Lyric's memory close, feeling the warmth of his spirit still with them. As dawn broke over Mossburrow, warm and soft, the village slowly came to life with familiar morning sounds, the clink of shutters opening, the low murmur of shopkeepers readying their wares, and the distant crow of a rooster. Reluctantly, Finn and his companions prepared to leave, grateful for the rest, but keenly aware of the journey awaiting them. After a final meal at the hearth and pause and a parting farewell from Elder Briar Whisker, they set off down the road that would lead them home to Meowford. The morning's quiet walk gave way to gentle chatter as the sun climbed higher, and eventually Finn's thoughts turned to the warmth of the Guildhall and the promise of a real bed. Meowford will feel good after so many nights on the road. Finn sighed aloud, stretching his legs as he walked. A proper roof over my head and some warm stew. That's what I'm looking forward to. Thornwhisker raised a brow, a teasing glint in his eye. I don't know, Finn. Just because we're heading back doesn't mean you're free from training. He gave Finn a nudge. A few laps around the courtyard before dinner never hurt anyone. Finn groaned, though his smile betrayed him. I thought this journey was training. How much more can I do? Thornwhisker grinned, his voice taking on a mock-serious tone. Every young adventurer thinks that until they've sparred with Forge. And if he sees you slacking, he'll have you hauling ingots from dawn until dark. Brightpaw snickered, chiming in with a wink. Don't worry, Finn. We'll all come watch, for encouragement. With a resigned sigh, Finn rolled his eyes, but he couldn't hold back a laugh. Despite the exhaustion, their light-hearted banter lifted his spirits, and soon enough, they were talking of all the comforts that awaited them. By the time twilight began to fall, the distant watchtower of Meowford rose above the trees, silhouetted against a sky streaked with pink and orange. The cobblestone streets welcomed them back, each familiar stone beneath their paws, feeling like a reassurance. As lanterns flickered to life along the main road, and the scents of evening fires drifted from nearby homes, a deep sense of relief washed over them all. They had returned, a place of safety after a long journey. They moved through the winding streets, Thornwhisker leading the way toward the Guildhall. The building's imposing stone walls were softened by ivy and moss, and its stained glass windows glowed with faint, colorful light, depicting scenes of famous adventurers in battle and at peace. Above the heavy oak doors, the emblem of the guild, a golden pawprint surrounded by stars, gleamed, polished by hands that respected its symbol. Finn felt a thrill of pride as they approached. They were here to report in, not only a mission, but Lyric's legacy. Inside, the Guildhall was bustling. Adventurers gathered around the main hearth, laughing, sharing tales of recent journeys, and swapping strategies for the next hunt or expedition. The rich smell of roasting meat and spiced stew filled the air, and Finn's stomach growled as they made their way through the hall. Despite his hunger, his mind was focused on one thing: the report they needed to make to Nightsong, the Guildmaster. At the far end of the hall, in the shadowed alcove by a row of ancient maps and artifacts, they saw him. Nightsong, the black-furred Guildmaster, was seated in a high-backed chair, his sharp green eyes watching as they approached. Nightsong was legendary not just in Meowford but throughout the guild. He was a master of stealth and quick reflexes, a cat whose daggers were said to be faster than thought. He stood slowly, his movements silent and smooth, like a shadow come to life. You've returned, Nightsong said, his voice carrying both relief and authority. I see in your faces that this was not a simple mission. They gathered around him, settling into the chairs around the long table. Willowshade placed 2 books carefully in front of her, Lyric's songbook and the strange tome they'd found at the bell. Her expression was grave, and she ran a paw over the covers as if choosing her words carefully. Nightsong listened in silence as they recounted everything: the resonance of the bell, the wolves drawn by its strange magic, and the figure, the mage who had wielded magic unfamiliar to all of them. When they spoke of Lyric's last moments, of his bravery, Nightsong's sharp gaze softened, though he kept his silence. At the end of their report, he sat back, his green eyes narrowing as he considered their words. It sounds as if you encountered something more than just a rogue magic or a stray enchantment, he said, his voice slow and thoughtful. A mage, you said. But this magic, this presence, it is not something I recognize, and that, he added, leaning forward, is what concerns me most. We found something else too, Willowshade said, her paw hovering over the rune-covered tome. This book. It was at the bell, almost as if it were left there deliberately. I can't read it, but its magic is potent. I could feel it from the moment we saw it. There's something deeply powerful here, but it's like nothing I've seen. Nightsong's gaze flickered over the tome. He nodded slowly. There is one place that might provide answers. The scholars at Mistvale Spire have knowledge of ancient languages, and if there's a way to decipher those runes, it will be through their wisdom. Willowshade's eyes brightened at the mention of Mistvale Spire. The tower was legendary, an ancient fortress of magical learning hidden deep within the Whisperwood. Wizards, mages, and scholars who devoted their lives to uncovering magical secrets resided there, studying everything from ancient spells to rare artifacts. It was said that every page, every stone, held centuries of magic, carefully guarded by those who lived within. I would be honored to go, Willowshade said, her voice steady. If the scholars can help us understand this book, perhaps we can learn more about the mage and what they intended. Nightsong nodded, then turned his gaze to Brightpaw, who was watching Lyric's songbook with an intent expression. And you, Brightpaw, Nightsong continued, his voice measured. What will you do with Lyric's book? Brightpaw's tail twitched, his green eyes serious. Lyric left it with us for a reason, Guildmaster. It isn't just a collection of songs. There are entries in here that read like journal entries, and some of them feel like clues. I think he meant for us to use it, to find something. There might be answers hidden in these pages. Nightsong studied him, a hint of approval in his gaze. Then take the book and follow those clues. But take caution. Lyric's mind was a clever one, and if he left puzzles behind, he likely did so with purpose. Brightpaw nodded, clutching the book a little tighter, his face set with determination. Then Nightsong turned to Thornwhisker. And Thornwhisker, he said, I need you to deliver a full report to the main Adventurers Guild in the capital. The council needs to know about this encounter and the potential threat. They will want to consider the best course of action for the towns in the nearby regions. Thornwhisker inclined his head, his expression resolute. I'll make sure they understand the gravity of what we found, he said, and that they know it's not something to take lightly. Good. Nightsong's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Finn, who was standing beside Thornwhisker, eyes wide and attentive. Finn, I want you to accompany Thornwhisker to the capital, but you have an additional task. Take the fragments of the bell with you. The council at the guild will want to examine them. They may be able to determine what sort of magic was embedded in the bell. Finn's heart raced at the thought. Me? He asked, a mix of nerves and pride in his voice. Nightsong gave a small smile, something rare for the stern guildmaster. Yes, Finn. Thornwhisker has spoken highly of your progress. This journey will serve as valuable experience, and you'll be a help to Thornwhisker as well. Forge will want to see your progress too. At the mention of Forge, Finn's eyes lit up. Forge was one of the most respected blacksmiths in all of Felidia, renowned for crafting armor and weapons that seemed almost alive with the magic he poured into them. He was also known for his tough love, pushing young adventurers to their limits. Finn had trained with him a handful of times and learned more with each visit, and the thought of showing Forge his progress filled him with pride. Thornwhisker placed a heavy paw on Finn's shoulder. You'll do well, he said, his deep voice full of reassurance. We'll stop by Forge's workshop before we leave. He'll be glad to see how far you've come. Finn nodded, his heart pounding with excitement. The journey to the capital would be a challenge, but he felt ready. Nightsong looked at each of them, his expression softening. Each of you has a path to follow, he said, his voice full of gravity. These books, Lyric's songbook and the rune-covered tome, may hold secrets we can't yet see. There is purpose here. Whatever Lyric left us, we owe it to him to follow these threads. They nodded, each feeling the weight of their responsibility. The loss of Lyric was a wound that still felt raw, but with these tasks, they had direction again, a way to honor him. Now go and rest, Nightsong said. You've earned it. They moved toward the dining hall, where adventurers of all types were gathered, their laughter and voices filling the space. Plates were piled with roasted meats, warm breads, and fragrant stews, the scent alone making Finn's stomach growl. As they settled at a table, they found themselves surrounded by curious guild members, eager to hear about their journey. One by one, they recounted the tale, describing the eerie resonance of the bell, the enchanted wolves, and the strange mage who had appeared from nowhere. Their audience listened in awe, hanging on every word. Finn noticed the expressions of shock and wonder on the faces around them, and for the first time, he felt a sense of accomplishment, not only for what they had done, but for what Lyric's memory had inspired them to do. When the meal was over, the room began to thin as adventurers drifted away to their own rooms or missions. As they walked back to their rooms, Brightpaw handed Finn Lyric's songbook. "Have a look through this tonight, Finn," he said. "Lyric left us more than just his songs. There are memories in there, and maybe more than we realize." That night, Finn sat by the fire in his room, carefully turning the pages of the songbook. The parchment was worn, the ink faded in places, but each page was filled with Lyric's unmistakable handwriting, full of sweeping loops and careful flourishes. On one page, a line stood out to him. "True bravery is found not in strength, but in purpose. Even the smallest act of courage can shift the world in ways unseen." Finn closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. It was as if Lyric was there beside him, a quiet presence reminding him of why they fought, why they pressed on even when the path seemed impossible. In that moment, Finn felt Lyric's spirit with him, a warmth that would guide him, just as it had always guided their team. In the quiet of the Guildhall that night, Finn and his friends drifted into sleep, comforted by the sense of purpose Lyric had left them with. And as dawn began to touch the horizon, they knew that though Lyric's journey had ended, theirs was only just beginning.